We are going to be again talking about what is new in VX.2.4 for PADS Professional and Xpedition. My goals today for what everyone is going to learn is what's included in PADS Professional as well as Xpedition in the newest version, VX.2.4. Also, we're going to talk about how to utilize some of these features in the tool and where to download the newest version of the tool. And I'm going to give a brief overview of our Support Center website that Mentor Graphics has, where you can download the software, open up service requests, and look for relevant tech notes and other information. So just a little bit about Oasis Sales. So again, I work with Oasis Sales. We are a premier reseller for Mentor Graphics, now a Siemens company, and we have been for over 18 years. We are a small group that tackles many different challenges in the electronic design space. We offer solutions for printed circuit board design, signal integrity simulation, as well as verification of FPGAs, harness design. So we cover a large gambit of Mentor Graphics software. Down below, you'll see all those states that we currently service. So if you're in one of those states, we might be your contact for Mentor Graphics tools. So please feel free to reach out to me, and I'll have my contact information here in the slides in just a bit. Also, we are partnered in this webinar series with TriLogic. So TriLogic is essentially our counterpart out on the East Coast. And they, again, have been a long-time reseller with Mentor Graphics as well as Siemens now. And they are also a very big leader in the Omnify tool for PLM and data management. So down below, again, you'll see the states that they service. So if you reside in one of those states, please feel free to reach out to TriLogic, and they can always help you out with getting an evaluation copy of the software or talking to you about how to figure out some of your design issues or other solutions that might help you in your design process. Okay, so just a nice overview of the large area of the country that we cover. So again, if you reside in those states highlighted, Oasis Sales will be your reseller, and TriLogic will be your point of contact on the East Coast. We do host webinars very often. So if you like what you see today and you're interested in what else we have a couple of different ways that you can find our webinars. They are all recorded, and I'll be uploading this to YouTube once we're done today. You can find that either at that Oasis Sales YouTube link, or you can go to oasissales.com or trilogic.com in order to find links for these archived web seminars. Before we get too far into things, I would like to just point out the date for my next webinar that I'll be hosting, and that's going to be focusing on running Valor and hyperlinks rules directly in Xpedition layout. So that can pertain to PADS Professional as well. So that's going to be same time, about a month from now on Thursday, November 1st. Here's my contact information. If you have any questions once we're done with the webinar or anything else, please feel free to take a quick screenshot of that or write that down. I'll show that my contact information again at the end of the webinar in case you do have any questions or want to get any more information. So if you are not familiar with the client that we're using today's GoToMeeting, hopefully everyone can hear and see my screen fine. Also, if you'd like to ask any questions during the webinar today, please feel free to do so in the chat box. And if those are relevant to what we're talking about, I'll definitely answer those as we go. Otherwise, I will follow up with any questions that you may have. Okay, so with that, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started into our actual topic today. Again, that's what's new in VX.2.4 for PADS Professional and Xpedition. Before we get too far into the details, I would like to point out what kind of tools that Oasis Sales and Mentor Graphics can help provide you with. So these are the four major divisions of tools for printed circuit board design and analysis. So what we're going to be focusing on today is Xpedition PCB, and that is an enterprise level tool with very high-end layout capabilities as well as data management capabilities and collaboration. So if you have a large organization spread out through multiple states, Xpedition can definitely help you leverage that as high as possible. So PADS is a long time standing printed circuit board tool. that is still a very capable tool. It's just maybe a little bit easier to use and doesn't include those high-end concurrency capabilities or data management capabilities that you might not need. So if you're unfamiliar with PADS Professional, which we will also be talking about today, PADS Professional is driven off of Xpedition layout. It just doesn't include those data management capabilities or concurrency through multiple sites. So if you're unfamiliar with the PADS Professional, it's definitely an interesting tool, and we have a few webinars that I've talked about specifically on PADS Professional. So more on the simulation side of things, hyperlinks is an industry standard for PCB analysis and verification. We have the ability to, the hyperlinks family has quite a few different tools that allow you to do signal integrity analysis, power integrity analysis, as well as even some EMI checking. Okay. And then Valor, more on the back end. So we are doing assembly, test, and manufacturing checks on the actual printed circuit board to get your highest yield possible. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is actual Support Center. So many customers might not actually be familiar with Support Center. So Support Center is a very important website where you can go to basically do everything that you need to do with your Mentor Graphics software. So that's just a link for it if you're unfamiliar with that. You do have to register an account that is associated with your company site ID. If you don't know what your site ID is and you'd like to register an account here, please feel free to reach out to me. I can help you get those types of details. Okay. So also with downloading the software off of Support Center, we have the ability to look at other information such as release notes, documentation, and getting started documentation. It's a very powerful resource if you are coming up with packaging errors on the schematic and you get an error code, you can just type that in and it should really quickly let you find some helpful documentation to resolve that type of issue. Also, you can just use it like Google and search for anything that you might need or think of how to do, and it should pop up with some relevant information. And the last thing that's very important to do on Support Center is the ability to open up service requests. So all Mentor Graphics customers that are on current support contract have the ability to open up service requests, and that you can do that all through the Support Center website as well as track the progress of those service requests. So definitely an important website to become familiar with, as well as make sure that you are in fact registered for it if you not already are. Okay, so we'll hop right into what is new in the PADS Professional space. So again, if you're unfamiliar with PADS Professional, it kind of sits in between PADS layout and Xpedition, and it looks and feels exactly like Xpedition layout. There have been some features stripped away just to ensure that there is a difference between these two licensing levels. So some updates for PADS Professional in VX.2.4 is the ability to have a new standalone schematic capture suite. This is called PADS Pro DS Suite. So this is just a standalone schematic capture sheet for PADS Professional. You can create new projects, you can edit existing projects, access the library, as well as do PADS AMS simulations. So PADS AMS is included in PADS Professional as well as this PADS Professional DS Suite. And what that is it allows us to do SPICE simulation directly in the schematic without having to redraw it in an LT SPICE tool or anything like that. We can do all of our SPICE simulation directly within DX Designer, ensure that the circuit works correctly for us, and then forward that directly onto the layout. Okay, so it can be a very powerful solution. A new feature to PADS Professional is the ability to actually run a standalone library manager instance. So that allows us to open up an LMC or central library directly from this standalone library tool. In the older versions of PADS Professional, you had to access the library tool either from the schematic or from the layout. This will allow us to go into the start menu and just start a library manager instance and either create a new central library, open up an existing library, and start editing parts, symbols, or cells directly from there. I do see a question from Brian. He asks, does the PADS Pro DS Suite come with access to the Constraint Manager? Yes, it does. Yes, that will allow you to access the Constraint Manager from that PADS Pro DS suite. Also, a new addition to PADS Professional, one that's been waited for a while now, is Enhanced Library Services. So Library Services, if you're unfamiliar, allows you to point to other designs, as in the PCB, other central libraries, or a standard HKP file, which you can get from multiple websites for your library contracts and library creation. And we can import design objects directly from those other printed circuit board files or other libraries. This will hopefully allow for you to quickly edit your library and get all of your parts that you need into that. And then the last thing for PADS Professional, Constraint Manager templates. We have the ability to create Constraint Manager templates directly from certain nets, how you have them set up, their constraints associated with those net classes. This can be great for setting up DDR very quickly, and it will allow you to use those Constraint Manager templates in other designs. Okay, so Xpedition has had this capability for a while now, and now we're just bringing this into the PADS Professional space. Okay, so now we're moving on to updates that are affecting both PADS Professional as well as Xpedition. So a new feature that has been added into library integrity checking is the library verification capability. What this will allow us to do is open up a central library and start verifying that library. It will check for orphaned objects such as symbols that are not associated to a part, cells that aren't used in a part, and then also it will check for symbol checks, such as if the symbol doesn't have a correct timestamp or anything else that we want to check in the library. We have the option to run this check, and at the end, it'll generate a report for us of everything that it flags. And then also, while we are running this report, we actually have the ability to select if we want to repair all of these or if we wanted to delete these orphaned objects. Okay, so that's very easy to run and can be quite useful to make sure that your library is good to go. In the Constraint Manager, we now have the ability to see and define number of test points required for each net. So that's just added another column into the Constraint Manager, allowing us to see the number of test points required. And then just like a lot of other constraints that we have in PADS Professional and Xpedition, we actually have the ability to update from the printed circuit board to see the actual number of test points on those nets that have been placed. Stitching vias, there's been a new feature there that allows us to essentially create schemes of stitching vias. You can quickly create a scheme on a certain plane. You can kind of see in that bottom right picture that those stitching vias have been assigned and dispersed through one of those power planes, and now we can save this scheme onto disk or locally with that design. And now we can use the stitching via schemes in other designs really quickly. You can just add stitching vias and load that scheme in, and it will generate that stitching via scheme just as how you set it up in the other design. Just some general drafting enhancements that have been made to PADS Professional and Xpedition. One is the split shape command. So again, on the right-hand side, we can see a picture of what this will do. I have a complex polygon for one of my planes, and all I have to do, if I want to split those into 2 different shapes or 3 different shapes, I can draw a few lines, select that plane shape, and then do a split shape command. Another big feature that has been brought into VX.2.4 is enhancements to the 3D step export. So historically, it has been one large step file that has been exported from the layout tool. That can be useful, but it also can get a little bit overwhelming because that file can grow fairly large because it is hosting a lot of data from that 3D model. Now we have the ability to actually select which files get output, and these will all be exported to separate step files. So you'll see down below, I can have a separate step file for the board and its holes and components. the conductors, now we can actually export the internal layer conductors for those step models as well. That used to be a limitation with the 3D export. And we also have the ability to export step files for the silkscreen, solder mask, and cover lay if you are doing any rigid flex design. So the MCAD Collaborator has also been updated in this release. There's been quite a few changes to the MCAD Collaborator. And if you're unfamiliar with this tool, it is included in both PADS Professional as well as all licensing levels of Xpedition Enterprise. Okay, so what the MCAD Collaborator does, if you're unfamiliar, is the incremental data exchange format. So essentially, we send a baseline from the mechanical tool to an electrical tool, and we are able to import that baseline, such as a board outline, and implement it directly in the layout tool. Okay, so it allows us to interface much more directly with mechanical engineers. It works with SolidWorks, Pro-E, NX, anything that supports the ProStep format or IDX file type. Okay. If you'd like to know more about this tool, we do have webinars that we've hosted, and I think I'm going to be hosting one here in a few months on this newer version. It is quite powerful as long as you get it set up correctly. It allows us for seamless integration or exchange of data between mechanical and electrical tools. So what has been updated in this new version? The GUI, the user interface, has been updated in order to allow us to see and identify design items that we're sending back and forth much easier. Also, log files have been updated to reflect changes after you actually apply those changes. Siemens NX, so we are further tightening that integration between Siemens NX and now Mentor Siemens Company Xpedition layout. We can actually import direct parasolid models from NX, and they can import 3D models directly from PADS Professional. So no longer needing to export step and import step. Just some minor enhancements that have been actually updated to what is being exported from the tool. Now we are again including internal copper, fiducial, planes, mounting holes, and silkscreens in that baseline export. Also, in the incremental exchange, the proposals, if you will, we can send flex areas, bends, and component rooms, which used to be neglected in this particular data exchange. Okay, so just some updates to Xpedition layout itself, not pertaining to PADS Professional. Sketch Planner, I'm sure everyone is familiar with Sketch Router. So the Sketch Planner allows us to grab a selective grab a group of nets, and instead of just automatically routing those with the Sketch Router, we can actually draw a sketch path. So what that sketch path will do is, you can see in that top right picture, it generates a sketch plan showing how much room these different traces will need and the general area that those will take up. So sketch plans allow us to plan out the topology of the board and then execute a sketch route after we have actually planned out a lot of those routes. So what's been updated here is, you can kind of see, if you're familiar with rule areas in Xpedition layout, we have a rule area at this rectangle on the right-hand side, and the sketch plan automatically necks down to follow those DRC guidelines for that rule area. So the trace and space guidelines or rules for that rule area might have necked down, so you can see that sketch plan is necked down as well. 3D chip stacking, a pretty high-end packaging technique that Xpedition supports, has been enhanced. We also have the ability to create VIA models. So you can see down below, I can create this VIA model as in the pad stack editor and save that as a VIA model for those grounding vias or shielding vias. And you can place that as one VIA. So that can be very powerful if you're doing a lot of differential pair routing that needs to be shielded. You can easily create complex VIA topologies and place those as one group. Also with an Xpedition, RF has been enhanced. We have the ability to import DXF, and the RF engine will automatically create that as an RF shape, which really reduces the time to go ahead and get started with your RF routing. Also, RF routing has been improved with 2-click RF routing to add RF meanders, and we can actually use the sketch router on these RF signals. Okay. All right, so that is just kind of a quick overview of some of the major features that are coming out with VX.2.4. And now I'm going to hop into actually showing off a few of these and talking a little bit more about the Support Center. So I do want to make sure that everyone's aware of this website. Again, this is support.mentor.com. Very powerful website that will allow you to see all of the products that your particular organization is registered for. So if you do not have an account, make sure that you find your site ID, register on here, and now we can start looking at documents for your software as well as download the current version. So if you're looking to download software, all you have to do is click on whichever tool that you're interested in and go to the download section. Okay, so we can see that our Xpedition VX.2.4 is the most current version. If you would like, you do have the ability to download archived versions or older versions of the tool. So you can see, I can actually look down and see all of these older versions that I can download. If you'd actually like to go older, down at the bottom, you can find even older versions that you can download and run on your machine. If I actually take a look at the downloads, we have a couple of different options to download the tool. The newest being the cloud-based installer. So the cloud-based installer is essentially an online installation utility. It's only 108 megabytes, so you don't download the entire tool at once. You just download the installer, and it will download the necessary install documents that based on your product selection choices. Okay. Or you can still do the older methodology of downloading the entire software. So you can see here that the 32-bit Xpedition VX2.4 is 3.7 gigabytes. That's just the older offline installer that still works well. All right, so after you've gone ahead and actually downloaded your software, again, if you're unfamiliar with Support Center, there's just a lot of great information on here. I can look at documentation, resources, or actually type in an error code if you have that. Okay. And then the last thing that I'll show here within Support Center is the ability to open up service requests. So again, if you are a current Mentor customer on a support contract, you have the ability to open up service requests for your design issues. So if you have an issue that you think shouldn't be happening or you cannot figure out how to get around, to open up this service request, you can choose your product, either PADS Professional or Xpedition, and start typing in your issue, and a Mentor support rep will get in contact with you to help you fix this issue. So some great resources on here. I definitely recommend getting used to this. You can get the new versions, the release notes that are supported with that version, as well as anything else for those documents. I will show, last thing, if you are interested in seeing everything about newer versions, if I come to the product page and then go to documentation, there's a great document type filter where I can just click on release information. And now I can actually look and see the different release notes for Xpedition Enterprise, or just the highlights, a high-level overview of the different release highlights that we have with this release. Okay, so this is all accessible to you through Support Center. Okay. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is the ability to do PADS Professional Library Manager. So if I'm working on Windows 10, and if I'm coming into my Start menu, I can actually look in PADS Professional. So Windows 10 kind of makes everything a little bit cluttered in here, but I can actually see PADS library tools. So if I just click on that, this is going to open up the Library Manager application in a standalone format. So before this release, you did have to actually access the library directly through the DX Designer tool or from the layout. So this allows us to open up a central library. I can just go File, Open, and open up the central library that I'm working with. Also through here, I can create a new central library if you would like. Before this, you would have to create a new central library in the DX Designer workspace. Just like we would expect in the library manager in previous versions, I can see all of my parts that I have, as well as symbols and associated cells. So I can just single click on one of these to get a preview and double click to actually start the editor for either of those tools. Okay, so everything that you should be expecting to do in the central library, you can do in the standalone PADS library tools. Okay, so a new feature to the library manager is this library verification. So what library verification allows us to do is to start stepping through our library to check to see its integrity. So this is a library verification window, and as we step through it, we can see what it's actually checking for. So first, it's going to look for orphaned objects, such as cells that are not used in a part or symbols that are not used in a part. That is what would be specified as an orphaned object. So as I'm going through here, I can actually click through these and I can delete orphaned objects if I would like, or I can just keep on stepping through these different sections and generate a report of these orphaned objects. Okay. So incomplete parts, as in missing an associated cell or no cell associated with that part. Symbol checks, we can look for symbols with missing timestamps. Doesn't look like I have any in this particular library. Another check that it's checking for is missing an automatic color. This is a common issue with symbols. Sometimes in the symbol editor, you might not select to have an automatic color associated with this symbol. What that does is if you change the scheme in VX Designer for your coloring scheme, if this doesn't have an automatic color defined, some of these symbols will not change the correct color. And then it's checking for duplicate objects in your library as well. So once you've stepped through all of these sections, I can see all of my different, the summaries. I've got 170 different orphaned objects, 18 incomplete parts. I can either save this report to a file as just a .txt, and it's going to have all of that information there for me. Okay, so that is the library verification tool. So that is accessible in Xpedition Library Manager as well as this PADS library tool that I was showing it with. Okay, so this is the PADS Professional layout workspace. And if you are only familiar with Xpedition, you should notice that this looks very similar to Xpedition layout as well. Some of the new features in here is this split shape icon. Again, these are extended tooltips. Xpedition utilizes extended tooltips. So this is the new feature that allows you to essentially split a complex shape. It does not have to be a plane. It can just be any draw object. And it's very simple to just draw a line through that object, select the shape, select this split shape icon, and then select the line, and it will create that polygon into two separate shapes. That's just one of the new usability features that we've got. All right, I do have a 3D representation of this board. And as we can see, if you're unfamiliar with 3D, again, we do have quite a few webinars talking about the abilities with this 3D engine. So it is quite capable. And there are a couple of things that we can do. So you can see that I have a mechanical step model imported on this board. If I want to actually go ahead and export something out of this design, the export capabilities for step have been improved. Okay, so of course we can choose what type of file that we want to be exported, what directory, and then the name of that file. Mechanical model options, we can either export all of the mechanical models that we have imported into this design, such as the enclosure itself, maybe a fan or a bracket that you've also imported. New features here is we actually have the ability to go ahead and export metal components such as holes, the actual conductors for top, bottom layers, new to this version is the internal layer conductors. So I know a lot of customers were asking for this, so hopefully this will alleviate some of the concerns with that. And then all via holes, even blind holes, if we would like that. These will all be exported in that step model. Also, we have the ability to export silkscreen and solder mask as their own standalone step models. So I've gone ahead and exported that. We can see that these are all those step layout or step models that were exported from that export option dialog box. So now the biggest one that we have looks like it's about 33 megabytes. I know before they actually created multiple step files, some of these step files could get up towards over 100 megabytes and be a very slow import into a mechanical tool. Okay, so also in the MCAD Collaborator tool, again, this is included with PADS Professional as well as Xpedition. And I do see a question from Bob Wilson about Autodesk Inventor. I'm not, off the top of my head, I am unsure if it works with Autodesk Inventor. I'll definitely look into that, Bob, and get right back with you. Okay. So if you're unfamiliar with this tool, it allows us to have the ability to send a baseline first, as in all of our design data, to the mechanical tool. Once we've sent that baseline, the mechanical engineers can propose a change, such as the board outline changes or fiducials or mounting holes change, and they can send just that change request back to us in this tool. So some of the new features within here, just the ability to ensure we are working in the same realm with our mechanical engineer. We can actually ensure that it's working with Outlook. If we want to propagate an email once a change has been requested or a baseline has been sent, we can make sure that we are sending it to the correct person, or we can just use a data path such as a directory on your network and send those changes back and forth that way. Okay, just a quick overview of kind of how this works. If I'm happy to send my baseline, I will first set up a directory. I can just create a directory on my shared drive on your network. And now everything that is going to be written from this MCAD Collaborator dialog box will be written to this collaboration path. So that way in the mechanical tool, you can have your mechanical engineers point their collaboration directory to that same directory that we have set up. That way we can exchange that data. So first I'm going to send this baseline file. What the baseline file has is essentially all of this information that we see here. I've got all of it selected, and that's going to be sent in that baseline file for us. After we sent the baseline, if I actually go ahead and move a component, 1 second, it's generating that baseline file for us. So you can see new to this version is the internal layers that are going to be included. That is going to include all of that internal layer copper data. I probably should have turned those off just to save time on this generation, but it should go ahead and work for us. Within this, we can actually send comments back and forth. If I put in a file note here, such as why a component needs to be moved to a certain location, or why we are changing the board outline, those comments can come in either from the mechanical team into our electrical world, or from the electrical world to the mechanical team. Okay, so now once I've sent that baseline, if I click on it, we'll see all of the information that's actually included in that baseline here on the collaboration window. Okay, So once again, we've already sent our baseline. And Kirby, I see that you asked, does this work with SolidWorks? It will work with SolidWorks as long as you are licensed to use CircuitWorks as well. Okay, so CircuitWorks is included in, I'm not certain on which licensing level that SolidWorks has to have in order to include CircuitWorks, but just ensure that you have CircuitWorks and this will work fine with that. So now, for example, that I've sent my baseline, if I just want to move a component, say I just want to move that IC right there. And let's say I want to zoom in here and just go ahead and rotate this 90 degrees. We'll see that there. So now I'm actually going to send a proposal and I can generate what has been changed on this baseline. Once you have the change, we can actually send that baseline directly to the mechanical team. And if I actually select U5 and have it show exactly what happened, it will highlight and show the rotation of that component. So that's the incremental data exchange that allows us to pass just the changes of the components that are changed back and forth between electrical and mechanical. So you can see how that capacitor or that IC is just being rotated 90 degrees, and that's all that we're going to send back to the mechanical team. All right, so that was all I was planning on showing today. I don't see any further questions in the dialog box. Again, this is PADS Professional and Xpedition VX.2.4. It is the most current version. Please feel free to take down my contact information. If you have any questions or want to see anything else associated with this release, please feel free to give me a call or shoot me an email. Definitely always happy to help out. All right. Thank you for attending, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.